Okay, it's 5:30. We call the Community Police Review Board meeting to order. Okay, we're gonna clerk call the roll, please.
Member Beasley Day,
Present.
Member Bryant,
Present.
Member Byrne, Member Christensen,
Present.
Member Grant,
Present.
Member Smith, Member Solorio,
Present.
Chairman Han.
Present. I usually say here and you kind of.
I had to
mess
keep
me
it
up.
going too.
I know, it's terrible. Sorry.
Chairman Han, Board Member Demrell is absent this evening. We would like to ask the board to consider his request for an excused absence, which meets our criteria for granting of an excused absence. At this time, we ask for a motion from the board to grant him an excused absence.
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Oh.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, do we have any declaration of conflicts of interest? And then we'll go into the public comment. Anybody in the audience have a public comment that they'd like to do? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to,
Oh.
oh, we have one.
Good evening, board. The reason I'm here is because I'm here to advocate for you guys to push the city into a non-binding arbitration for the memorandum of understanding that will be negotiated in 2027. The reason why is because of Joseph Lamontia. And I know you guys have heard of me say this before, but honestly, with that being said, I really don't want Joseph Lamontia back in the force. For one, it undermines the city's ability to get rid of horrible cops who kill our citizens. It undermines the chief of police who got to fire him. And, and apart from that, I heard last time that I was here that you guys are in favor of arbitration because if you guys were to fire him and he goes to trial, then you guys would have to pay him out. But this guy is already suing the city again because that's his ability to do so. So I'm really hoping that you guys explore other options where we don't want binding arbitration, where the city is forced to give this up to a third-party arbitrator. And again, if I really want to bring up George Floyd, because again, the cop that killed him, luckily there was no binding arbitration with that. But if it would have happened, things would have gotten worse for the city. But luckily there was justice. But if George Floyd would have to happen here in Modesto, we don't know what would have happened and there would have never been justice. And I just feel like we should be able to hold our police accountable just like we have our citizens accountable and protect our community a little bit more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I see some blue cards over there.
Hello, everyone. Earlier, we were looking at some of the stats of why people are being arrested or cited, and a lot of it is our unhoused neighbors in our community. And unfortunately, Supreme Court ruled that people who are unhoused cannot, sleep in the park if you decide that they can't do that, or lay down somewhere. And unfortunately, Gavin Newsom, our governor, said that this was an okay policy and has allowed our police departments to do that. These are people, and I am disgusted to see people in Modesto and in Stanislaus County being treated in such a manner of having no place to live, not having enough food. We don't have enough resources in this city. Rent keeps going up. I mean, honestly, groceries are out of control. And what we're doing is we are citing them. We are taking their things away from them. All people want to do is live. And I think one of my greatest fears I've realized is becoming houseless, because it can happen to any of us. We are all closer to becoming unhoused than becoming a billionaire. We need to side with the oppressed, the marginalized, because we're there. In the United States, our healthcare system's absolute crap. And that's been very much in the public eye as of late. And it can be one time you get in a car accident where your insurance won't cover you and you can be out on the street. It's like that in this country. So every day as I walk around my neighborhood here, I see our unhoused neighbors. I don't see them as other. I don't see them as someone we need to push to the side. I see them as our brothers and sisters, and we have a duty. So I'm disgusted that our police department, we spend so much money on policing, but we're not helping people. The point of our city is to help people. The point of government is to help people. So I think this is something we really need to talk about. Pushing policies around that don't make being unhoused by whatever circumstances as a crime. And that we need to be compassionate, loving, and see ourselves in our neighbor. So yeah, this is my first time here. I don't know everything that you do, and I'm excited to talk in front of you and to learn more. But I really do hope that we can see one another as people in a community we need to take care of and not divide ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, good evening, y'all. Similar to my colleagues, I feel like the point of this board is definitely one of the aspects is to ensure that there's accountability, and every single position does require accountability, especially if folks' lives are at risk. And one thing that will get in the way of accountability is having that binding arbitration process, whereas the city cannot hold folks accountable, especially if they can contest their actions that put folks at risk, such as what Joseph Lamancha had done. And the fact that there's a binding contract, and chances are that people like that can get that job back, that loses that accountability piece and also control of the city as well. And that is one thing that we want to hope to have a conversation more about. Another conversation is that we are seeing a rise in hate crimes, such as recently when you had in the bus stops that one person putting out hate speech, kind of more towards the south side, saying kill wetback or kill wetback families. And as you know, the Latinx community here is very important, and we need to kind of have that conversation to ensure that we protect folks, especially folks that are very vulnerable. And another example too is the most vulnerable populations are the houseless. And I feel like we need to have that conversation because our criminal justice system and policing criminalizes those folks. And we're looking at the statistics from the monthly reports. The last one that came out was in June, but there had been over 1,000 House of Life, or what was it called? Quality of life crimes, what's called. And those don't need to be crimes just for being of a certain class. That doesn't fix the issue of houselessness here. It exacerbates it, and it puts them in even more vulnerable situations, just like when a couple weeks ago, Akeem was killed Sunday in downtown Modesto, hunted down by folks because he had nowhere safe to be or nowhere safe to go. So we want to go ahead and have these conversations with y'all about this. And we hope to move forward with that. Thank you.
Good evening, y'all. I rise today to discuss more on the matter of a non-binding arbitration and future MOUs between the City of Modesto and the Modesto Police Department. And in case there's any interpretation that this is just the opinion of a few folks here in the community, I want to make it clear that this is something that's being discussed throughout the state of California. In the City of Palo Alto, when revisiting their MOU with their local police union, after an arbiter substituted their own judgment about appropriate outcome over the judgment of the leadership of the Palo Alto Police Department, and as part of an audit by a group that I'm sure will be very familiar to those here, OIR Group, OIR recommended that the city consider the viability of other options than binding arbitration for appealing officer discipline. I would hope the members of this committee have the courage to do what we see the folks doing in Palo Alto doing and exploring options beyond that of binding arbitration for our future MOU. Moreover, California Attorney General's Racial and Identity Profiling Advisory Report from the calendar 2024 year noted that arbitration is a common dispute mechanism in public labor and legally binding form of dispute resolution held outside of formal courts. Nevertheless, using arbitration for peace officers' disciplinary appeal raises accountability concerns. According to policing scholars, arbitration almost exclusively reduces disciplinary penalties for officers guilty of misconduct. Scholars have also found arbitration also allows for third parties who may not be from the community to make the final disciplinary decisions that overturn police supervisors' decisions or oppose civilian oversight entities such as yourselves. According to scholars, arbitrators can reinstate fired officers, sometimes with back pay. Police chiefs have claimed to be undermined when arbitrators return officers to duty that have multiple incidents of misconduct. This decreases a chief's ability to manage their force and may demonstrate a loss of authority, which can affect the chief's ability to lead. According to those same researchers, the tendency for arbitrators to side with the officers is likely because police officers and unions have some level of influence over the selection of the arbitrators. Even when arbitrators side with police supervisors, their imposition of sanctions may be limited. For example, a memorandum of understanding between one California city cited in the Attorney General's report and a local police union did not specify a limit to the amount an arbitrator may reduce discipline, but impose limits on how much an arbitrator may increase discipline. Taken collectively, I think between the actions we see going on in Palo Alto, as well as that of our state attorney general's report, it's clear that the conversations are moving away from binding arbitration in California, and I don't want Modesto to get left behind in those conversations. And I feel that there's already so many ways in which our community is failing to lead, failing to think with a future-minded mindset. And I'd really encourage that as we reach the end of this year, a New Year's resolution for this entire committee is to explore options beyond that of binding arbitration. 2027 may seem like a far time from now, but if we don't start planning in advance, we won't be ready. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I wanted to talk about an issue that a lot of community members have brought up, which is that of racism and white supremacy within this community. As one of my fellow friends here said, there were stickers posted around regarding that with like anti-immigrant propaganda, and that is just not acceptable here. I don't know why it took so long to get things done, but I would like to ask of you guys to think of how to tackle this and how, because that's not okay, you guys. A lot of our community involves a lot of undocumented people, not just from Latina communities, but from Arab communities, Muslim communities, like all types of people of color. And so I also want to request that we think of sanctuary city resolutions that we could include to make Modesto a sanctuary city, especially with the upcoming presidency coming up. That makes it a little more dangerous and a little more difficult for our community, and we don't want our communities to get targeted, and we want them to feel safe and welcome in Modesto because they deserve and have a right to be here as well as us. So that's my request. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we move on to consent calendar, the minutes from last meeting. Everybody have a chance to look at it? Anybody want to do a motion or make corrections?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, item 4 is continued to January meeting. Our bylaws say that January is the meeting that we elect officers. So we're just gonna move that to January.
Item A.
And Chair, I think we need a motion. Is that correct, John?
Do we?
To move it to January?
Yeah, we can do a motion.
Yeah, so if you wouldn't mind, Mr. Chair, I could just explain just for a moment so everybody.
Okay.
So item 4A is election of chair and vice chair for CPRB for the 2025 calendar. It's brought to our attention that according to the bylaws in section 5.2, the chair and vice chair will be elected annually at the regular meeting in January. So that's the background information. And if you, as the city attorney has indicated, you're welcome to take a motion.
I'll make a motion to move that to January.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, now, we are going to do item B, which is establish the Community Police Review Board Annual Report Ad Hoc Committee. And, I am a de facto member of that as the chairman according to the bylaws, so we need two others. And I'm supposed to appoint, but I would rather those who want to do it volunteer to do it for the next, ORR, the next report, police review report. Not everybody at once. Nancy, I see you raising your hand. No?
A lot of work.
Surely somebody else
Well,
would
you.
do it as well. I will do it. I will
Okay.
be on a committee, but it would be, I'm not gonna do it by myself.
Okay, who else is,
I will.
okay, great. So we have R2 and me, and the three of us will get together and go over the report. You did such a great job last year, Nancy, that we needed you to do it this year too.
Sorry. Sorry. All right, so then we establish that.
I'm just gonna say that.
Okay, so let's see, we need to have a motion and a second on this one.
So it has to be a motion to appoint yourself, or you're already appointed, right?
Well, I think just do all three of us, yeah.
I don't think you need a motion for that one.
We don't?
The
You don't?
bylaws state that.
Oh,
that
okay.
You appoint. So.
Oh, well, you appoint them then. So,
All right, so we don't need to have a motion. Okay, now on item C, discuss the calendar of topics for 2025. Scotty?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. At the last meeting in November, there was some discussion regarding some of the topics there, and we took notes. And so what we've done is we've created, it's essentially a draft of potential topics for this next year for consideration for the Police Review Board for the presentation calendar for 2025. Simi has put a version up on the screen as well, so you can take a look at that. These are by no means anything that's recommended from staff or any of us. These are just things that we've heard from all of you, and we place these on the agenda, on the various months here. There was some consultation with, we've in talking and briefing with the board members, and this is kind of our best first stab at just consideration for this calendar. What I would recommend is tonight that you take a look at these, determine if these actually match what you all as a majority would like to move forward with for topics this next year. And the potential order, there might be some that are time sensitive, others that you may just deem we could probably have this at any point during the year. And if there are additional topics you would like to have added, you can certainly discuss that. And as a quorum of the majority of the group that basically directs staff to come back at the January meeting, and we'll have a final calendar that all of you can adopt at that time. And then what I would recommend is tonight, especially, is select one topic at least for January, since we'll be coming back to that meeting to approve the meeting schedule for the rest of the year. That concludes my report.
I do have something to say. In January, it says that we had the use of force study update. So that's not a topic.
These are topics that that were mentioned at the last board meeting. So we just noted these down, and it's up to you to discuss if you'd like to move them forward.
Oh, so it's not final.
No, this is not by no means a final. I'm sorry, the presentation of it makes it look like it's final, but it is not. It is merely extremely draft, and it's for up to all of you to discuss. This is meant to spur discussion and agreement.
okay.
Well, if,
Good, Nancy.
could, I mean, in light of some of the comments, could we just include a brief presentation? At least I would think it would be brief by MPD in January regarding policing and homelessness issues? Would,
Yeah, I guess I'd need a little more clarification on what exactly, that's a pretty broad topic, so exactly what the board would be looking for.
it is a broad topic, and I think there was maybe some of the issues that were raised pertain to county-wide issues, not necessarily the city, but in terms of quality of life arrests or citations and how is that handled? I don't think our city, I could be wrong, do we have a prohibition against sleeping in the park?
We do have an illegal camping ordinance, so we do. And the city has a long-established three-prong approach to addressing homelessness and issues, which is one of them is shelters and services. The other one is providing, one's shelter, one's providing services, another one's a community accountability. And I think community accountability is the prong that was referenced in some of the public comments. It is a tool we use, but there are, we do have ordinances against illegally camping on public property and such things like that, which we do enforce.
I would also like to say that I would like for us to go over the Know Your Rights Summit and build that together. I believe that was said at the last meeting too, and I do not see that on here. And so I truly believe that needs to be on there, whether it's the January meeting or the February one, so we can kind of get that underway and build that out, because that was in our recommendations, was to have that. And that's one of the points about the Community Police Review Board, is actually teaching citizens about some of the rights they have in certain situations and scenarios. So I really think that's important, and that should be in here somewhere. Thanks.
I agree with you on that. But for the homeless one, just kind of back to that topic, I think just any data you guys have that you're willing to share with us in regards of arrest with the unhoused and some of the crimes that they've committed, just to inform us on reasons behind it. I know there's an ordinance and stuff like that, but any other crimes that may have been committed that led to an arrest?
Yeah, if that's ultimately what the board decides, I'm happy to provide information on that information.
Okay.
Regarding the homeless issue, I think a lot of the quality of life issues and what's offered in the community. There's a Stanislaus Homeless Alliance. It's a county-wide board that meets the second Wednesday here at 5:30. We haven't typically gotten into the policing part of it, but the quality of life and what's available, services and all that, that would be a great place. I'm not trying to discourage you from coming here, but there's a lot of folks that can answer a lot of questions with, related to mental health and all the other issues with homelessness. So that could be an option for you, that some of those that spoke.
Would it be an option to also have maybe a presentation from them to the board, and then also one from MPD, so we can kind of look at both sides of the policing and the nonprofit organization that helps out with the unhoused? So that could be something like in February, possibly, if we give them ample time, February, March, because I know January probably won't give them enough time.
I have a conflict too in February that I've brought up a couple times regarding our group assignment to study reducing youth arrests, particularly among Latino youth.
Yeah.
And I've got to get the judge scheduled in. So in speaking with his schedule in our committee meeting, we talked about February
Okay.
the 19th for him.
So we could probably do the homelessness or unhoused and the data for the police force in March. It gives ample
Yeah.
time.
That's fine.
And then also, can it be within, because it's a small statistics, but I think it's very important, within the homeless and the police presentation, could there be an age range in there of who's getting arrested that is unhoused. Kind of good to know if it's between 25, 35, 35, 55. So we can get an idea.
If we're talking about that in March, though, that is when the OIR report is presented to the board, which took some time last year.
Yeah, it did.
Is it possible to have two presentations at one time? On the
Would be
19th?
it would be almost 3 in March because.
No, I mean in February.
Oh, in February.
February.
Depending upon how long you think Judge Villalobos would speak.
I think we could, ask them to limit to 15 minutes or so.
I think that I saw that was 15 to 20 minutes with
Mhm.
questions.
Okay. Well, I don't know why we couldn't do two.
Yeah, I think we
topics.
could do two.
I have a question regarding this topic that we're discussing now and how it relates to the topic that's on schedule for April of 2025. And I guess I would direct my comments and my questions to the chief. What do you see as the thrust of this presentation on community engagement and the activities presentation? Would that be a logical place to discuss maybe some of the data on how many folks are being arrested for a variety of issues, I'm sure, but that relate to homelessness or to unhoused?
Yeah, it could. I think, again, these were topics that were brought up by the board. So I guess off first blush, again, it was topics that came from you guys. It seemed like community engagement was more of what the police department is doing to do outreach and build,
Mhm.
community relationships, not related to homelessness. Of course, we've done presentations before. I believe in here, I definitely know to the Forward Together Committee about our alternative response units, chat,
Right.
and things like that, which
Yes.
are part of our community engagement program as well. So that's when I say it's a broad topic.
Right.
We can go a lot of different avenues with what data or presentation that you guys want to do. So I'm happy to bring in information on whatever aspect of this that you guys would like. I just need some clarification on where to tailor that approach to.
Okay, that's fair.
And Chief, if I could just add on to that as well. I know that Board Member Byrd, you had requested a little while back information regarding any and all diversion or programming that we have for services for youth to be involved with kind of across the city overall. And that would be any programming that's delivered by Parks, Recreation and Neighborhoods, the police department. I know that the fire department has some programming and other the departments as well. And we have actually collected a lot of that information. We have the budgets that are involved in that. And so I know that that was some of the genesis of this particular topic.
Great. I have a comment regarding the community engagement too. To go back to the conversation of when is our community engagement going to take place? And in particular, I'd like to know how much money the city is willing to spend on getting us a tent, a table, uniforms to make us, or polo shirts, badges, to make us look official when we're out engaging with the community. All those things cost, so I would like a figure or a budget from the city set aside to assist us in doing our jobs.
That is something we could take back to the city manager and police chief to discuss that.
And also, it's by the decision of the board, but January, February, or March, can we please meet in the community somewhere and have our meeting there? I mean, I've asked a lot of times, and I just feel like now we've been together a year and some change. We need to be having at least a meeting in the community somewhere. I don't care if it's right in front of this building, but we need to be out in the community, at least having a meeting so people can thoroughly understand what we are as a board, what we do, who we are, some of the stuff that we've accomplished thus far. Zoom is great, but it's always good to meet constituents and people where they are. And I think that's very important. So it could either be you know, it could be the presentation by the judge. I mean, that's going to be about statistics about people that are in a, you know, a minority community. Why not us go to the minority community and have that presentation? And I believe it's enough time for us to plan where we're going to go. So I would like for us to do that and look into that because it's not on schedule, and believe that's something we've talked about a lot over the past year.
I think that's a good idea. Excellent.
Is that something, Scotty, that you may be able to go back and maybe find some locations for us and then come back in January and we can try to select one location for the February meeting if that's a possibility?
Yeah, if that's a desire of the board, majority of the board. I mean, obviously, I know we're all kind of discussing things, we're hearing things individually, and when it comes to the majority of the board's direction and recommendations on these, can certainly evaluate that.
So
So can I make a motion?
I think it's just asking
Alright.
everyone if we can just like maybe raise our hands if we all agree that we want to have our February meeting outside of the chambers.
I have a suggestion. In February, the board is going to be invited to the King Kennedy Center at our meeting on the 17th, and it's going to be a town hall about use of force in blacks. There were a couple articles in the paper that basically brought attention to the disparity, African Americans being 4% of the population, but I believe it was 17% of those of use of force. And then the report from the Stanislaus County Sheriff's Department was even worse. And so we're planning a town hall on February the 17th, a day before our regular meeting, where the board will be invited to come. So instead of trying to do two things like that, maybe we could focus on that one for February.
I can't even lie, I disagree. Reason being is because what we do right here is different from what that's going to look like. And I want people to get a visual of who we are as a board. See, the day before, like, it's an event, but we can't all come because
Of the
isn't
Brown
that
Act.
isn't that a Brown Act violation?
Correct.
Because we can't all be there. And so when we have a meeting, we could all be there and, you know, have the discussion. Because I believe if it's an event outside of the chamber, we can't all be together due to Brown Act violations.
Well, it doesn't have to be declared a official meeting for everyone to attend that 17th town hall. You can just come as a concerned citizen.
But
Well,
isn't
Austin-
use of force like a strong, like we have an ad hoc committee for use of force, so that doesn't count. I just don't want us to focus on that, and then I don't want us to focus on it, and then the day before they say we can't do it because we're gonna break a Brown Act violation. I would rather want to know that now. You know
So,
what I
but
mean?
this
Because
is
that has
the-
happened in the past.
Let's ask the attorney.
You could have less than a quorum attend the meeting. So you could have 4 people and those 4 people could speak. You could have the other members attend as members, like
As
the
just,
members of the public,
Yeah.
but not speaking about the board.
Exactly.
So if you want to designate 4 people to speak on behalf of the board at the meeting, then that doesn't violate.
or we can all show up and just be concerned citizens and not
Just attend, yeah.
just
You can,
attend.
you can attend, anybody can attend. So it's,
Okay.
but you could decide that you want to appoint 4 people to represent the board, and then you could talk about the board that way. So
Please consider everyone, because we could go to an event and have a town hall, but people are not going to know our structure, how we're organized, how we do things here. And I think that's very important. I mean, we can't just sit in the chamber forever. I mean, we could all support each other and go to some of these events. That's a fact. I'm not dispelling that. But people do not know exactly kind of like what we do. And us just going there as concerned citizens, yes, we're focusing on a topic, and I'm an African American, trust me. I do believe that's very important. But at the same time, I really want us to go to the King Kennedy Center. And I feel like it's a perfect segue right after the use of force town hall to be like, okay, well, y'all need to come tomorrow to the meeting because y'all came here today. So then that provides us the avenue to get more people, especially African Americans, to come the next day. That's all I'm saying. So please consider.
And we have been talking about this at many meetings, and I thought it was something that was feasible, and we just haven't really pushed for it. So I think that we should do it.
tonight we should try to push. So I just, if you can ask the judge if he's willing to meet with us at King Kennedy Center, and if we all agree to meet at King Kennedy Center for our agendized board meeting, then we can all just,
The city can.
Well, I think we need to keep it separate because the town hall is gonna take every bit of 2 hours.
no,
And it
it's gonna
sounds
be
like-
like separate days.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
let's,
Well,
so
one of the-
are we in agreement that we want to do an outside
Yes.
meeting in February?
Yeah,
Everybody agree?
I think
Yes.
so, but
Okay.
I also would caution, we don't know whether the King Kennedy Center is available on that normal meeting night. So, I mean, there's some logistical things that have to be
Right, well,
addressed.
you can come back. If they're not available, find another spot for us and we can do it there.
Yeah, just as a matter of process, I do actually want to defer to the city attorney on the process of having a meeting in an alternate location.
Yeah, I think we need to confer with the city clerk's office before we decide on an alternate location, because this is the designated location that we have meetings that, are normally advertised.
Okay, so then come January,
So in January, we can come back. I mean, essentially this exercise is to discuss and decide on the topics for this next calendar year. The months that you'd like to have these topics, which we're taking notes of that. And then we would come back in January with, here's what we've heard, here are the list of topics. For January, this was agreed upon, so we're going to be doing that tonight, so to speak, for the January meeting. And then for the following meetings, you would be adopting the calendar for the remainder of the year. If you look at this, we'll send out the draft to you all as well, and then individually, you can, provide to us, just take a look at it. As long as we're not going back and forth between everybody. And then we'll come back with a very, a fleshed out list that's based on what you've provided tonight. And we'll confer with the city clerk regarding the location of the meeting.
I can foresee that there could be some technical issues and that sort of thing, having a meeting at a remote site. We typically make our meetings available on Zoom. So that's an issue that we would need to factor into this
Yeah,
consideration, right?
Yeah, I remember Brian, that's a very good point, and that's something we would have to talk
Right.
with our city clerk's office and then also our IT department. I mean, I know that there are things that we can do,
Well, sure.
but we'd have to make sure that there's certain things like, internet connectivity, those logistical things. So let us that's my ask of you, is that you let staff go back. We can kind of talk through these logistics and we can come back in January and let you know what that looks like.
Sounds
That's my
reasonable to me.
recommendation.
Yep, one comment I want to throw in that as I think two things need to happen, not necessarily, I want to have it in the community and I want it in February, but it should be tied to what's the best topic focus of our meeting to have in community. So once we define all of these and which months they're happening in, might be a better way to say that would be the one to go for holding in community if we get approval to do that. Just a thought.
An observation on my part would be, and this, I think, goes along the lines of what Austin was talking about, that it's an opportunity, it would be an opportunity for us to engage, a segment of the community and inform them about how we function, what our scope of practice is, what we can do and what we can't do, so that they're better informed about what our responsibilities are and what the limits of our responsibilities are.
I think that's a good point, that at that meeting offsite, we would have kind of a brief, this is what we do, this is who we are, this is what our, this is where we have authority and here's where we don't have authority. So I think that would fill up, if we did it in February, that would pretty much fill up the agenda for that month.
I wouldn't think it would take all that long to explain, and maybe there'd be some questions. But so whether it works in February or another month, I don't think we would
Right.
want to go out and just do that at a meeting. And the other thing I'd just like to point out, we have talked about the Know Your Rights Summit, which Austin brought up tonight, and and where would we like to put that on the agenda here? Or is that maybe you can just take that into account.
No, so there's not a date for it. I think,
No, but when do we want to put a discussion of
I-
that on the
I
agenda?
Oh,
would suggest
January.
that we do it in January, so
Yeah,
if
my bad.
something comes out of that, that we could do in the broader public meeting. It
Mhm.
makes sense to do that.
I agree.
It could make sense to add it after the judge presents as well. He'd probably have some insight on that since he'd be an audience.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Okay.
Lastly, it's about the schedule. On July, I just need more clarification on it. On July 2025, it says an update on officers at school program. Two questions. What would that presentation look like? And two, why don't we get this update monthly? Because if it's something that's like improving a situation at a school with students, why aren't we getting, I would say, a monthly report about how many hours were expended, how many students were affected and impacted? I would kind of want to know that on a monthly basis rather than wait all the way until July to know.
Well, I think that this is about increasing that activity. Is that right? There aren't officers at are there or are there not officers at the school?
We have one officer, Detective Sean Dodge, who's a school engagement officer at 4 different middle schools on the west side of town. That's what we currently have. So again, this is, and Scotty, correct me if I'm wrong, but these are all notes that the city manager's office took based on conversations that the board has had. So in reality, when we talk about what's being presented, that's what the clarity we need from the board tonight when you set these topics.
Correct.
Or else January.
Or in January, yeah. Definitely before the meeting, so we have time to prepare.
I think also according to the schedule, in August, immigration and policing information is kind of late. I
Yeah,
think
we
that
need
should
that
be
earlier.
moved up on the agenda. And I would be willing to try and talk to the judge to see if his presentation can be pushed back and substituted with that. Because I think that's more relevant with what's going on right now.
That'd be the same day.
Can they be in the same meeting?
Um,
Um,
so like what, 15 minutes
I
each?
just feel like it's kind of the same. It's kind of like they coincide with each other a little bit.
Yeah.
So I felt like
Okay,
I agree with Vice Chair Solario that I felt like that would be something that can possibly be the same month in February.
okay.
And it could be something that, he incorporates within his presentation. Possibly, maybe, I don't know. Maybe that could be, it says MPD, so maybe they can kind of have a joint little thing there.
It
Not
seems
sure.
to me that there have been several bills introduced at the state legislature dealing with this issue of whether or not they're going to allow local law enforcement to collaborate with ICE and to enter, educational facilities and that sort of thing. So I think depending on the actions taken by the state legislature and then conversely, that's going to filter down to local governing bodies, in our case, the city council, to decide what direction they want to give the police chief as far as whether they want the police chief cooperating in, in ICE enforcement, that sort of thing. I mean, that just seems a logical sequence of events to me.
And even if the information is not a lot, but just to report out something, because, a lot of people are walking around in fear right now.
I get that.
And so even if you don't have, even if you say, well, we're not sure, we're working with the federal government or ICE or whatever, but we just don't have the information yet, that's better than not saying anything at all.
So then are we going to try and get August moved up to February?
Is everybody in agreement with that?
I am.
I think that's a good.
Okay.
If we can handle it logistically from a time standpoint, and do justice to both topics, yeah, I think that's a valid consideration.
I agree with Board Member Bryant on that. Definitely.
So do you think if we just ask each person to give 15 minutes?
even
20, 25
minutes,
minutes, I mean.
20, 25.
questions,
Okay.
I would think, but 15 minutes is not much. Especially when you're considering an attorney slash judge. That's just not a lot of time.
Right.
I,
They need
the
50
thing I
minutes.
saw, he promised to keep it in
Oh,
20
okay,
minutes, but
all right.
You know, that's a lie.
yeah.
To try and help us get through a few of these months, can I offer that we clarify, are we in agreement in January, the election of the chair will hold and the use of force study update? Are those two sound for January with everyone?
And then also, if we, I mean, we should have the time to discuss a little bit about the know your rights as well, right? Like we just start the topic,
Yeah,
start
that's-
I think that one will have
conversation.
to
Yeah,
be
that
added
isn't
a little bit.
presentation, that's basically.
Yeah, it's just a
More
discussion like this.
discussion.
Yeah.
And I think we probably should take some action at that meeting to solidify this calendar of events for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
yes.
I think we need to get the first few months solidified today if we
Yeah.
can.
Okay. So we're in
Close.
agreement on the
first
three,
quarter at
the
least.
three topics in January, the election, use of force, and then a beginning discussion. Know your rights.
Yes.
Then February move to the presentation with the judge and immigration and policy. Does that feel right to everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
And OIR, I believe, should have the whole meeting in March.
Yes.
In April, if we're looking at community engagement activities presentation, is there another piece that could be a secondary presentation in April?
I mean, community engagement, the school program, yeah, the officers at the school
That was
program.
going to be my suggestion.
Yeah.
Question. Do we have to solidify this today?
I mean, at least
Because if
4
not-
months.
4
5
months is what I was
Oh,
looking
okay. I
for.
thought you were doing the
Just-
first.
yeah,
I thought you were
just,
doing it by quarter,
I
by
was
3.
trying to help get us the first quarter or so
Yeah.
set. It's still something we can change if something comes up and we need to. But
Right.
staff needs time to present,
Right.
to prepare.
I was just gonna make a suggestion that, like you said, it was just, in April, we just do the same thing we're doing today. Just clarify the next months as far as what we want to put on topic.
I think we can confirm that we're still on the same page monthly if you'd like.
Yeah.
Right,
But
yeah.
suggestion would be community engagement activities along with the update on officers at school programs. I feel like those two could go together
Yep.
and let the rest sit where they are for now and reevaluate in January.
Yeah.
Does that work?
Agreed.
Yes, that's what I was.
And,
that's what I
and
was hoping.
with all of this, we're
They want you to do it all together.
we're basically agreeing with what was just discussed through April, but at
Yeah.
any time a topic can come up and you can bring it up and we might move everything away to deal with that topic, especially if there's some, something, an event that goes on that we need to address. So,
And really all that's left on there anyway is probably fairly sitting in the right place. MPD response report to ORI in May to weigh into or add influence to those of us working on the annual report in June.
Yeah,
Yep.
I agree.
okay. Everybody
Is it
okay?
possible by April for us to have some marketing material, for example, a brochure or something that whenever we are doing whatever we're doing, that we can have a physical handout?
Yeah, that's kind of a separate from these topics that we're talking about, but as I said earlier, we're gonna check with the city manager and we'll get back to you on that.
And then,
Okay.
no, I'll do it offline. I'll do it here.
I'm good.
Okay,
All
could-
right, so I think we're set, are we?
so I'd like to just make sure that staff has captured this correctly. So I have for January 2025, please correct me if I'm wrong, I'm doing my best to follow along here. Election of chair and vice chair. We have the use of force study, and then we have discuss know your rights,
Yes.
correct? That's it for January?
Yes.
Okay. And then for February, I have presentation by the judge. And then I have,
Immigration and
Immigration.
policing.
I'm sorry?
Immigration and policing
policing.
information.
I'm hearing this in stereo. Okay.
She's doing it live right now, so it's on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you, Sammy. Appreciate it. Okay.
Good.
And
Okay.
then for March, we have the OIR annual report.
Correct.
Right. And then for April, we have community engagement activities presentation, and then we've moved up the update on officers at school program topic there.
And then Scotty, for the February meeting, you're going to investigate the practicality of having an off-site meeting, correct?
Correct. Which is kind of separate from the topics, but we have
No, I get it.
captured that.
Right.
No, I just want to mention on the community engagement activities, we were discussing this, at our meeting.
So-
We look at the agenda and because we have enough time, we'd like to bring in, activities and engagement that nonprofits are doing beyond what the city, police department and fire department and all that, but if we can also kind of a comprehensive, this is what's happening in our community. Because I know that there's a lot of activity through nonprofits out there in churches that would be appropriate to be here. So just FYI.
I would
Sorry.
extend that topic piece in that meeting.
Yeah.
So should it only be one topic instead of two then?
Yeah, it's all, I'm just saying, I think that we have the opportunity to go beyond just what city provides for
Sure.
services. It's still the same topic of a community engagement.
But you're still comfortable with leaving the update on officers at schools on that same
Oh,
meeting?
yeah,
Okay,
I think
because
so.
that's part of the community engagement by
Mhm.
So, Mr. Chair, I'd just like to clarify, are you talking about, so community engagement activities presentation, there would be a city portion of that, and then there would also be a community portion of that?
That's what I was
Okay.
hoping to do.
Yeah,
so that
just to
we-
clarify for the staff, there's the reports that the staff creates, we bring back, we do presentations. And so if there's something from like community groups and things like that.
That's for us to kind of
Got
put
it. I'm just
together.
clarifying for,
we'll have to
know
work.
our workload too.
Okay, yeah,
Great.
thank
And
you.
again, I want to emphasize that within the community, there's curiosity of who we are and what we do. And so anytime we get a chance to connect those two with what we're doing, it would be good. It would be helpful.
All right.
All right. So if I could just weigh in, go ahead.
One of the topics, or I think it was a two-part sort of presentation, was regarding homelessness. One was a request for the Homelessness Alliance to come and speak, and the other was policing and homelessness. What I had written down was initially January, but we have quite a few things in January. So when would you guys like to have MPD come speak and thereafter have the Alliance come speak? As of now, I have Alliance slated for March, which would mean either you guys have a preference of who comes to speak first.
Well, March, we have OYR and we thought that would be the whole meeting. Do you feel there's time to add one? I
I
think that would be pushing it.
think it would be pushing it, but I wanted to make sure we kind of still have these somewhere, even if I don't know if you guys want them earlier than later. I'm not sure.
I guess we can just put them down in July.
Put them in July for now.
And
We'll
then-
reevaluate in January.
Yeah.
Just, move Know Your Rights to February if possible, and then maybe move that talk to January. Cause it's kind of fresh. I feel like we forget if it's all the way in July.
Okay, so move Know Your Rights to February and then have MPD come present on homelessness in January. Would that be all at this?
Is
chief?
it-
Is
No.
that enough time?
No, it's
I
not.
didn't think so.
Yeah.
Both presentations is going to be between now and January. To get both presentations done is going to be too much on my staff.
And we can reorder these when we get in January if we feel we need to. Hot topic. To not lose it, we should
Why
just get it.
why
on.
don't you put those topics in July as a kind of a parking lot, and then
Placeholder.
we'll come back and look at those after we get going.
Mr. Chair, I was kind of just a suggestion here and see what you thought about this is, we could put the ones in the months that we know, and then we have a list of them at the bottom that need to be assigned to the various months as they're coming
That's a
up.
good idea.
An observation, Brad, you mentioned having, community-based organizations, make a presentation at our meeting regarding what they're doing and their activities in the community and all that. I think one of the things we need to be, I don't know if sensitive is the right word, but cognizant about is what our scope of practice is, what our scope of responsibility is. We are the Community Police Review Board. And while these topics obviously are, I guess, somewhat connected, I'm not sure that falls within our scope of practice. I'm not saying it doesn't have value. It certainly does. But I think that's something we should be cognizant of.
I think that's always a good point, although if we're looking at policing and as it relates to unhoused people and quality of life citations, it seems like that does fall within our scope. Now, the other, in terms of having community talk about their services on homelessness, I mean, I guess that's more of a service to the public who might come to a meeting about the topic of homelessness and or unhoused, unsheltered population. So I don't know, but I think.
Yeah, I'm just not sure I'm not sure this is the venue for that. Like I said, it is valuable information, but, Brad, I'll ask you you're involved with the Stanislaus Homeless Alliance, correct?
Yeah.
And you are engaged in trying to find alternate housing and that sort of thing. I'm not sure that that's something that would fall within our scope of responsibility. As I said, it's valuable information, and the more the community knows about it, the better. But I'm not sure this is the venue for it.
I was referring to the item in April, community engagement and activity presentation, which has been something that's been requested on at-risk youth and those kind of things we're trying. And I was just saying that it might be nice to fill out the whole gamut of things that are available
I
for
took
youth.
that to mean what our activities are, what the CPRB's activities are as far as community engagement and our activities as a presentation.
No.
Am I mistaken in that?
Yeah, it's the police department, the fire department, Parks Rec, they all have things that.
It's
address
the
it.
activities of the city or in community, not
Mhm.
our
Yeah.
specific ones.
We're trying, that was to try and fill out what's available now and what should we, as a community look at, for broader activities and engagement for at-risk youth. That's what that was about, so.
All right, so I
Alright.
think we're good. I think we could add those two topics in July as a placeholder, and then I think we're all good with the calendar.
He actually put it down as the,
Oh, down at the
Markham.
bottom.
She did,
Oh,
so
okay.
that's good. All right.
Do we all feel good about this?
Okay, is anybody in the audience like to speak to this item? Unless.
It's already on. Hello, just a couple thoughts. I'll keep it quick about the immigration policy. I think the key question to get to would be, does the police department have any, or will they develop any plans to change any type of policy? Somebody mentioned, obviously, that would have to do with direction from the Modesto City Council. Because of any federal policy that gets changed. I just want to keep kind of that as like the main topic to keep in mind. Again, just a couple ideas. I think it was a March is when OIR releases its report. I thought that might be a really good meeting to have out in the community at a different space. And as well, or maybe, one or the other or both, when you all release your annual report, that would be another good opportunity to be at a venue, out in a different part of the city. And then, and maybe the chief can speak to this to say if I'm right or wrong, but I was thinking this summer or right before the summer would be a good time to address some of the youth issues, youth arrests, and youth programs. I think I remember hearing, maybe it was part of Forward Together or not, but that youth arrests or incidents involving youth went up during the summer. School is out, for some anyway. I know there's summer school, but I just remember hearing that. So just the thought on the calendar and topics. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Yes,
we do.
Fred.
More. sorry.
Hi, first I want to thank you guys for considering going into the community and having like this outreach towards the community. I think that's very important, especially since the chamber, like not a lot of people get here on a Tuesday, especially a work night. Like it's not very accessible. So I really appreciate you guys considering this. I do want to kind of, again, push that you guys really consider looking for alternatives to binding arbitration. And I feel like that's one subject that we have been bringing up constantly as a voice of our community. I do want to say that as an organization, See BIPOC, we are working on a petition. We are going to be going to, Crow's Landing, West Side Modesto, areas that we're familiar with, where we grew up, and informing people of these issues, informing them about the dangers of arbitration. When we get this petition and they're going to be signatures with area codes, we are going to tell you guys like, hey, it's not just us. These people are working families. A lot of these families, seeing them, they're not living in the best conditions right now. I literally know families that they're renting only one room. The mom is a stay-at-home mom, children with disabilities, dad working 2 jobs. They can't come to these meetings. And they're the ones who are the most vulnerable to these types of police violence just because of the area they live in. They don't have the time to become aware because they're trying to raise their kids. They're trying to be advocates for them at their schools. We need you guys to please consider finding alternatives to our binding arbitration. Because if not, a guy like Joseph Lamonte will come and he will get away by targeting these communities. And I know there's another thing that, what does policing have to do with homelessness? I understand that, but the key term here is intersectionality. Whenever police get into contact with community members, the fact that they have the ability, if they make a mistake or they feel threatened and react a certain way, that binding arbitration will help them out and not be held accountable. That's the connection it has with homelessness. Because we don't see police disproportionately killing white, middle-class, wealthy people. We see them most likely having these encounters with poor Black and Brown communities, including the homeless, which is why we brought up the homeless issue to you guys. Because yes, this ordinance that has been passed through the city allows the police to have these interactions with people. And the reason we're bringing up Joseph Lamonte is because their family advocated for him. But who's going to advocate for these homeless communities? Which is why I'm asking that. Thank you.
Chair, can I respond to the young lady's comments?
Yes.
Just so that you're aware, this Community Police Review Board has no ability and no authority as far as negotiating or, addressing specific issues in a memorandum of understanding. That's up to the city manager and the city council to make those decisions. Now, I'm sure that there's a variety of opinions on this board regarding what your topics that you're presenting to us. And I'm not trying to diminish the value of what you're saying, but we don't have the authority to address those things. And I just want to make sure you understand that.
I'm just sorry.
We can't have discussions, so it was just a response, but I also kind of just wanted to inform you of, we had a amazing presentation about arbitration in April. The forms are found online, but I also do have one with me. If you guys want this, I can give it to you after the meeting, and then you guys can look it over, and then we can discuss out of the meeting about this topic as well.
Thank you. Now we're moving to the staff reports, independent police auditors update. Mr. Conley.
When it comes to comments, we have to make sure that it's on topic as well. So right now we're talking about the calendar. So we just have to make sure it's on that topic as well. Okay. Awesome.
Do you want to speak?
Yeah, thank you. 100% is on topic. So do appreciate some of these topics that y'all have on, specifically when it comes to use of force. That ACLU report is extremely relevant and it needs to be talked about more. If we are going to talk about one of those goals regarding like arresting youth, and since this community police review board, one thing that maybe we can have conversations about is actually engaging with those youth. We're all adults. And the ones that are being impacted are the Latinx youth. And so it wouldn't make sense not to bring them into that conversation. And so maybe we can kind of talk about how to do that. Having even it in a different, having meetings in a different location, I think that that's a great idea to maybe engage more folks. We still are going to want to push the discussions of arbitration because we still think it's still very relevant. And I understand that authority is limited, but we want to make those recommendations and we want to get as much advocacy as possible. So we still support having that as a topic as community members. And we 100% support the idea of talking about the issue of houselessness because, and having those recommendations, because the issue of it is the policing of it. Because we've seen there's an increase of that, specifically after Grants Pass versus Johnson, where folks can be cited or arrested for being houseless, even if they have nowhere to go. And what that does is that not only puts a strain on those folks and exacerbates the issues for the houseless folks, it makes it much harder to basically solve this issue. And not only that, though, but what we've seen from the MPD police reports with those quality of life crimes. The last one, the most recent one that I saw came out in June, but with the quality of life crimes, it was about over 1,000 incidents in May, like 1,047 in May and 1,092 in June. And thinking about that too, like that's alarming. And I know we have like a three-pronged approach here, but I think we need to look at those numbers and see that's definitely not enough. And I think the policing aspect is a part of it so that we can have conversations regarding that to make those recommendations, you know? Because not only does it cost the houseless folks money, it costs the city and us money that we can maybe use for preventative measures so that we can actually provide the supports to prevent these crimes. Okay. And even calling it a crime, we can even discuss whether or not that's even like ethical. Okay. We do appreciate some of these topics and stuff, but these are recommendations that we also have as community members. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, now let's move on to staff reports, the independent police auditors report. Mr. Conley?
Thank you, Chair Hahn, and good evening, everybody. It is very nice to be back with your board again in person, and I will take to heart Board Member Smith's comments about the legal profession and its tendency toward long-windedness, and I'll try to keep this a tight presentation for you. I wanted to just briefly touch on the OIR annual report. I saw that it was a planned topic for March of next year, and I'm looking forward to be back and making that presentation. The content of it will be much the same, obviously, with a new group of completed MPD investigations to review, and that's the whole transparency and accountability piece of it. So I met with Lieutenant Kleiber earlier today to talk about kind of the universe of cases that have been completed in this calendar year. And just to provide you with a reminder, there's a percentage of internal affairs investigations, public complaint cases, and internally generated cases by the department relating to officer misconduct. I'll be looking at a sampling of those, including all of the complaint cases, the misconduct investigations that contained an element, an allegation of bias, policing of one kind or another. So that's part of the scope of work. The use of force review, again, I met with Lieutenant Kleiber, looked at the total number of force cases, and we'll kind of winnow those down and look at a quarter of them, not to re-adjudicate any of them, but again, just to kind of get some insight into the department's process, the effectiveness of that process, what comes out of that process, et cetera. The last piece that I want to mention tonight that that was not featured in the report, but is part and has been part of the independent police auditor scope of work since it started, is a discussion of an officer-involved shooting case. And it would be one that you have familiarity with from June of 2023 when you were first getting started, and I think you were briefed on it. And it was the one involving the officer, and the subject who was on a bicycle, and he was wounded, but not fatally. And the department has completed its administrative review of that case, and they have a brand new process for looking at critical incidents like that. I had the opportunity to sit in June of 2023 of the department's initial meeting, where it discussed the case from a variety of perspectives, training and equipment and tactics and supervision and all the different elements that go beyond the important but obviously limited question of whether the shooting was justified and legal. So the department has finished there were a number of interesting issues identified at that first meeting. The department has now finished its administrative review of that case and implemented any of the adjustments and changes or training recommendations. So I'll be reporting out on that as well. That'll be a new feature. So I look forward to being able to share some new perspective on the same very, very important content areas. And again, I think it's an important way for your board to be able to engage with what's going on in the department. And obviously the hope is that the public will get some important, useful insights as well. So thank you again for having me. And I certainly am happy to answer any questions that you have.
Anybody have any questions? Okay, anybody from the public have any questions on this item? Can you come up? Yeah,
It's mainly for like recording and Zoom and that kind of
Alright,
stuff.
cool. I was just gonna ask, where do you guys publish the OIR report? Because I tried to find it on Modesto's government page, but I couldn't find it. So if you could just clarify on that, thanks.
can you,
Is it on the police page?
I believe it should be on the CPRB webpage. I'll double check tomorrow and they can.
there is a report from, it's a half-year report, our first report that should be on the CPRB, Modesto Gov, and then committee is the CPRB.
And the last thing I would say before I sit down, Board Member Smith, I just want to mention that I had the opportunity to speak at least very briefly with Board Member Byrd before the meeting started. I'm looking forward to being in attendance in February at that town hall meeting. And I think that will be a great opportunity for me to share what the functions of this office is and hopefully get some insights into community perspectives as well. So I'm looking forward to that, and happy holidays, everybody. It's nice to be here.
Same to you.
Likewise.
And I can report, I just looked it up just now. It is available on the city's CPRB webpage. So if you
And
go to you search City of Modesto, CPRB on the left-hand side of the page, you will see a link to, let me just look at that.
documents and presentations.
That's it.
And
Documents,
then
presentations,
it's actually under Modesto MPD Independent Police Auditor Audit. So it's not under OIR.
correct.
Okay. Now we have a presentation from Chief on his response to the CPRB annual report of 2023.
Good morning. See, I'm already tired. It's time to go home. Good evening. Good evening, board members and chair. I was asked to present on any responses I had to the annual report by the CPRB. As was discussed even in this meeting, I do a official response, which is documented. That probably would be of interest to people in the public as well. I think that hopefully is on the CPRB website as well. That includes the responses from MPD to the OIR's annual report. Being a new process, obviously the board presented an annual report as well with 12 recommendations directed towards MPD. And so what we chose tonight was to be able to have myself come and provide that response to you, which I'm going to do now on those 12 recommendations. First and foremost, I want to thank the board. I think it's been a successful year in dialogue and information sharing and discussion. And I believe that I appreciate the board's interest in what is going on in MPD and trying to learn more and provide suggestions to me as I look to run the department. I value the board's input as I do other community groups and boards and commissions I meet with. But I do want to appreciate the recommendations in the annual report from the CPRB board. So moving forward, I do want to, I'll basically what I'm going to do is I'll read each recommendation that was provided to me by the CPRB's annual report and then provide a brief response on those recommendations. So number one was to consider providing monthly updates to the board on progress, conclusions, and what, just for the board's sake, whichever way you want. I know that my attention span of trying to remember something 12 questions later is something maybe I will forget. So feel free to take a note, or if it's something burning that you think you're going to forget as I move on to the next ones, if there's a question, feel free to shout out and I can pause before I go on to the next question. But the first recommendation was consider providing monthly updates to the board on progress, conclusions, or impacts to the department regarding major incident review team cases presented to board members, as well as regarding other sensitive cases of particular interest to the public. Such updates would enable board members to respond to questions from the members of the public and provide the most current information available to community members who attend our meetings and follow them on Zoom. So currently, I do, as you guys well know, provide a briefing to board members on major incidents, such as officer-involved shootings, to make sure that you guys get provided timely, critical information. Moving forward, I will consider the feasibility of expanding these updates as significant cases arise, but it's a very fine balancing act on the need to protect the confidentiality of personnel matters and the integrity of ongoing investigations. And so I'll address this in another response to one of the other recommendations that come down. And while, again, I think one of the value with this particular board is the interest that you have in understanding the police department and our process and how we do things, it's one of the aspects of OIR who has complete unfettered access to reports, body camera video, and things like that. But as we have cases that are still in the investigative mode of an ongoing investigation, there's law and there's many different avenues that I have to look to balance that confidentiality and the integrity of investigation. So I do appreciate the recommendation, and we'll try to consider with, I think, the underlying recommendation that you guys would love as much information as possible that I can legally give you. Number two is to consider imposing escalating disciplinary consequences for officers with repeated violations of body-worn camera policy. This recommendation is based on the IPA report and recommendations which included a description of an incident in which an MPD officer turned off her body camera during an arrest of a person who later filed a complaint against an MPD officer, sorry. It was not the first violation of the department's body-worn camera by that officer. So this issue I addressed in my official response, which is on the website to the OR's annual report. I am dedicated to maintaining the highest standards of professionalism and integrity in our department. And in doing so, adhere to the guidelines established by the California Peace Officer Bill of Rights, ensuring that officers' rights are respected while also holding them accountable for their actions. When policy violations are identified, I employ a progressive discipline approach. It's something that I absolutely adhere to and I support. And it's tailored to address and correct behavior proportionally to the nature of the violation while considering the officer's disciplinary history. This approach can range from counseling letters as an internal and corrective measure to written reprimands, and in cases where it's warranted, it can go to suspension or even termination. Training still remains vital to my strategy to address behavior and correct behavior, equipping officers with the tools and the understanding necessary to prevent future circumstances, or future violations. So the point I want to get to here is that each case is evaluated individually to account for unique circumstances of every incident. I also do take past history of violations into account, but this ensures that any imposed discipline is appropriate and aligns with my overarching goal of correcting behavior while upholding accountability. So a long way to basically say that in every single case of discipline that I issue, I take all the individual and unique factors of that case into account. And again, appreciate the suggestion, just as OIR suggested in their annual report. And I'll continue to make those decisions the best I can, balancing the need, understanding that I subscribe to a progressive discipline approach, and making sure that we're still holding officers accountable. Number 3 is consider providing settlement data for all lawsuits to the board and the public regarding alleged officer misconduct, including economic data and changes, if any, in MPD policies prompted by such settlements. So I think this request would probably be more appropriately directed, if the board would like this, to the city attorney's office or the city manager's office, or a Public Records Act request, because that data is available. But I do want to make the board clear that I do not subscribe to the notion that settlement data inherently correlates to any need for policy changes. Policing is a high-risk, high-liability profession where officers must routinely interpret the law and apply the law in complex and often dynamic situations. Both criminal and civil court proceedings inherently involve questions of the law, which can influence outcomes in many diverse ways. And our officers spend a lot of time in court, majority of the time in criminal court, where attorneys argue about the implication of the law and penalties and all those type of things. So in my experience, decisions to settle lawsuits are frequently made through the lens of business considerations aimed at minimizing expenses to the city, rather than serving as an acknowledgement of fault or a reflection on department policies. Whether the actions of the officers were legal and justified forms only part of the overall calculus in resolving such cases. Settlements often represent a pragmatic approach to solutions to avoid uncertainties, costs, and extended timelines associated with litigation, rather than definitive conclusions about the officer's appropriateness of policies and practices. So I absolutely remain committed to evaluating the policies and procedures to ensure that they reflect the best practices in line with the missions of the professionalism and accountability and hold people accountable in our department. However, I believe it's essential to separate business-driven decisions related to lawsuit settlements from the thorough and intentional process that we currently use and will continue to use to improve our policies. Number 4 was consider providing monthly updates to the board on complaints regarding officer conduct and any related incidents of violation of body-worn camera policy. So I think, again, this goes back to number 1, where it's not lost on me that the board wants to remain updated on issues going on with the police department. And it, again, is something that I'll continue to work with. And you guys know you can always reach out to me and we can have discussions and try to make sure that I'm trying to provide you with as much updated information I can. But I also believe that it's important to clarify the roles and responsibilities that are outlined in the CPRB bylaws. And per the bylaws, it's the independent auditor and not the CPRB that's tasked with reviewing internal MPD investigation files, records on using physical force, allegations of officer misconduct, and critical incidents such as officer-involved shootings and in-custody deaths. This includes full access to otherwise confidential department materials, including body-worn camera footage, official reports, and other investigative materials. The IPA assesses each one of these cases for thoroughness, fairness, objectivity, and the overall legitimacy of the investigation and our outcomes. So I won't go over the CPRB bylaws. I think you guys are all familiar with them. But I do, as far as ongoing updates on complaints or alleged violations and things like that, I think that is more suited to the scope of the IPA, who actually doesn't investigate ongoing cases, just like Mr. Conley spoke to earlier. He reviews cases that are closed and then assesses those for the thoroughness of those investigations. And that's what I continue to do. But I think there's an underlying theme here in recommendation 1 and 4 of just really trying as best you can to get more information And I do appreciate that recommendation, and will try my best to make sure that we can continue progressing as this is a new board. Go ahead.
In our bylaws to review there was a long
Sure.
paragraph there.
So really what it is when you talk about being updated on ongoing investigations, if you look at number 4, it talks about complaints made regarding officer conduct on monthly updates to the board on complaints made regarding officer conduct and any related incident to violations of a body worn camera policy. So the way I interpret that is the board is asking for monthly updates as we get complaints, and complaints as we get them are ongoing internal affairs investigations from our department. And that is something that ultimately the independent auditor, OIR, is tasked with reviewing, but again, once those investigations are closed. So again, it's a very fine balance when we talk about confidentiality, integrity of investigations. I think it'd be inappropriate for me to provide the CPRB with details about an ongoing internal affairs investigation.
Okay. I don't really think we were asking for like the details on like the investigation, the person, all that kind of stuff. But I know like in our bylaws for accountability, it's for police conduct and decisions on how it impacts the Modesto community. So I think us maybe understanding how many complaints our officers are getting as a police force in total, not just individual, by name, what they did kind of complaint, but just to see how our community is feeling in regards to our police force. So maybe we can just try to clarify that a little bit more, and then we can try to gather that data instead of like specifics. We're not really looking for specific names and that kind of stuff.
Right. And so we can provide, again, I think it's worth further discussion to clarify maybe the intent of what the recommendation was here. But where I took this, especially since it's calling out a specific violation of policy, which would be body worn camera video. And then there's just a general statement of complaints regarding officer conduct. There probably needs to be further discussion then on what that means by the board.
Okay. Thank you.
Number 5 is consider notifying the board of policy and procedure changes to MPD's policy manual. That's something that Lieutenant Clyburn and I have talked about. We currently use a company called Lexipol, which is used by many California agencies. It's an attorney firm that stays up to date on ever-changing laws and provides monthly updates on different policies as new laws come out to reflect, changes in policies, or if there's a best practice change. Sometimes it's just a few word change in a policy and things like that. But we're confident that we can come up with a way to provide the CPRB an email that provides a list of the policies that have changed throughout the month. It's typically a monthly update that we provide. We go through an internal review process to accept any recommendations or not accept any recommendations. But once we have those policy changes finalized, we can absolutely figure out a way, I'm confident we can, to provide that information to the board so you can see any changes to the policies. Number 6 was to consider expanding both the chat and MCERT programs by actively seeking additional resources from funding from government and private sources. Based on the information presented to the board by MPD, these programs have a track record of success in our community and have the potential for addressing issues that have arisen between individuals facing mental health crises and MPD officers, and reducing the burden on sworn officers, as well as achieving positive results for community members. So I absolutely share your recognition of the immense value of our chat and MCERT programs. I think that the numbers and the contacts that they have and the people that they help speak for themselves. And we are constantly looking for different funding sources. As I think the board is aware, our chat team is actually currently funded completely through the Community Corrections Partnership. And so that does not come out of our general fund or even Measure H. And that was something a few years ago that the CCP agreed to fund for 5 years. So we'll continue to look for available funding. Alternative response models are something that are very popular nationally. And when usually that happens, that there's funding and different grants that come along with it. So I do appreciate that recommendation, agree with you guys, and we'll continue to look for funding for those programs to assess the current resources and if in the future there's need to expand those resources.
Really quickly.
Yep.
The 5 years, when does that end? Do you know?
I believe we're in the second year, so I believe we have 3 more years of funding, but I can clarify that, but I think that's about what it is.
Okay, thank you.
Number 7 is to consider including questions in the pre-hire polygraph of recruits applicants designed to facilitate, to identify racial bias. Although such questions are included elsewhere in the application process, they are not included in the polygraph examination, and the board thinks this would be helpful in assessing applicants. So, as the police chief, I consider hiring people and the right people one of my most important responsibilities. And so the recruitment and selection of this and the whole process plays a critical role into ensuring that our department reflects the professionalism, the integrity, and the commitment that our community deserves. So we currently incorporate many measures. Polygraph is just one measure to assess bias throughout various stages of our hiring process. And our personal history statement, which I think you guys had I think you got a copy of at some point. There are questions about bias in those questions. And then at the end, you know, typically with a polygraph, there's a question of, is there anything else that you're withholding or weren't truthful about or something to that effect? And so, again, not being a polygrapher and not having the expertise, it is something as you guys had a presentation from the polygrapher. We will, or I will talk, and our staff will talk with our current one. We have gone to a different polygraph company since the last time we spoke and since that person presented. The contract was up. We had to go back out to a bid process, and a different company won that bid. So we will talk to her and continue the conversation and see if there's additional ways in the polygraph, knowing that she's the expert, that we could add questions to assess bias. So go ahead. Yep.
Okay, I do have a question on that. So I don't know, maybe we don't have the power or something, but how come we weren't briefed on that?
Briefed on what?
That you guys went to a whole nother polygrapher after the one that we were taught? Like, that means there could be 2 different processes, right? If you guys went with another polygrapher from before, isn't there like different processes?
I'm not 100% sure what you mean by processes. There's there's a polygraph association, there's certifications and things like that. So again, not being an expert, I'm very hesitant to speak a little bit to it. But I don't believe we still use a polygraph that answers questions or that asks questions and assesses people for truthfulness around their answers to those questions.
So it's just the same across the board?
I'm sure I mean, I don't know how to answer that question. So I'm sure each polygraph person is not the same, but there's certifications that they have to go through to be able to be a certified polygrapher.
The same questions?
What's that?
Do they use most of the same questions?
I believe so. I haven't looked at the recent one, but yes, there's a lot of, I think there's common themes throughout all of them that to assess whether people are being truthful or not and showing deception in the process. And again, it is one tool that we use, and it's not required, but it's something that I feel is very valuable and something that we use to screen people out, and we found as an effective tool. So number 7, so that was number 7. Number 8 is consider revising the department's use of force policy to consider use of force incidents that trigger an alert and further review in a rolling 18-month period rather than a 12-month period. Our department has used the 12-month alert system for many, many years, and I am confident in this time frame that it's appropriate in identifying patterns or concerns related to the use of force. The system allows us to monitor and address issues effectively while ensuring a timely and relevant reviews of officer performance and their conduct. As you aware, we've talked about it before, but the Peace Officer Bill of Rights also limits when I can institute discipline with officers, which is 1 year from the date of the incident that we become aware of it. And so that seems very consistent with our current system of our alert system. So I would be interested in understanding the research and reasoning that the CPRB conducted to support this recommendation. If there is any data or analysis that suggests extending the time frame would yield significantly better outcomes, I would be open to reviewing this information. But at this time, I believe the existing 12-month period strikes the right balance in promoting accountability and fairness. Number 9 is to consider further revisions of the department's use of force policy to ensure that prior uses of deadly force by the same officer, even outside the 12-month rolling period, is or are considered in the evaluation of the officer's conduct. So as you are aware, we critically review every officer involved shooting through both a criminal and administrative investigation internally. These reviews are also not only conducted by the department, but also by the district attorney's office, and when appropriate, the California Attorney General's office. Each incident is meticulously evaluated according to established law and other legally relevant information to ensure the thorough and objective analysis. Penal Code 835A outlines the legal framework for when a peace officer may use objectively reasonable force, including deadly force. So it's not just deadly force, it's all force. This includes the use of force to effect an arrest, prevent an escape, or overcome resistance. The law explicitly states that the decision by a peace officer to use force shall be evaluated from the perspective of a reasonable officer in the same situation based on the totality of the circumstances known or perceived at the officer at the time, rather than the benefit of hindsight. So when we look at 835A, it outlines how we judge and we evaluate whether force, including deadly force, if it's legally justifiable. So given the rigor of our existing mechanisms, the adherence to the provisions of 835A, and the thorough evaluation of every incident, I don't see a need to change the current policy. And I actually think taking into account other conduct outside of that incident could potentially run afoul of actually established law. So as with the prior recommendation, absolutely would be interested if there's some type of research or reasoning the CPRB conducted to support this recommendation. I would absolutely be open to understanding it or looking at it. Number 10 is consider continuing the race and culture relations training for all officers and consider making such training mandatory for all newly hired recruits and officers. Such training appears to have increased awareness of both MPD officers and the community members of their different perspectives and life experiences. So our culture relations coaching series is absolutely near and dear to my heart. It's something we started several years ago. I've had, I think, 6 cohorts now, and is something that I plan to continue to do. We have 2 cohorts per year. That's what I've committed to making sure that we do. And I think it's important. For staffing purposes, we're a young department with a lot of turnover in the last several years, but there is value in what I've seen in the 6 cohorts, and in talking with Michael Baldwin, who runs the course. I think there's a lot of value in having multiple different experience levels of officers in that course. And when we talk about new officers, while I don't disagree, and I think the concept is absolutely appropriate, and I understand where the board's coming from, we also have to make sure that our new officers that who get spread out throughout the department, that we still have appropriate staffing levels. So making it mandatory for new officers to attend in a certain period of time when we have 15 officers per cohort, so it's 30 officers per year, it would be difficult. So I wanted to make sure that the board understood that this is a very important program to me. It is something that we'll continue to put officers through and do our best to make sure that we put it through. New officers are included and will continue to be included in that training. But I do believe there's a value to have a wide variety of experience levels and perspective in that class. Number 11 was consider the possibility of reinstating the Pellet B exam, which is also called the post-entry level law enforcement exam, in the hiring process for all sworn applicants, rather than waiving the requirement for applicants with degrees. If the degrees were earned years before the application, then the board suggests that the Pellet B exam would be appropriate. So again, it's one of the things that totally appreciate the board's input, but I think I have a little different perspective on this recommendation. So at the Modesto Police Department, and I'm sure in most, I don't think this is unique to the Modesto Police Department, but I absolutely value an educated workforce. So although obtaining a college degree, does not inherently guarantee a competent applicant, it does demonstrate determination, discipline, and the ability to set and achieve goals. Our hiring process is designed to thoroughly evaluate candidates through multiple measures. This also includes reviewing school transcripts and incorporating a writing assignment when they come to a chief's interview. If they make it that far in the interview process, we do a writing exam when they show up for that, a 30-minute writing exam where it's based to answer three different questions, and we're able to then assess immediately their writing style, their ability to express themselves in writing, and that helps with our hiring process. So these steps ensure that we maintain a rigorous standard and for evaluating applicants while recognizing the effort and commitment demonstrated by those who have earned degrees. So it's something that I think that I'm very comfortable with. I think we have a screening process to make sure, because the Pellet B exam is a academic test to evaluate grammar and writing and different things like that. But if there is some type of research or reasoning the CPRB used to support that suggestion, I'm absolutely open to looking at this. Any additional context would be helpful in this regard that the CPRB may have as we continue to always look and refine our hiring processes. And the last one is number 12. Together with the city, sponsor a Know Your Rights training for the community semi-annually to enhance relations and understanding between MPD officers and the community, to educate community members regarding their rights during encounters with law enforcement. I absolutely support, and I think I've shown through my actions that I support and promote anything that will improve relations and mutual understanding about police-community interactions. The success of this training, this type of training, depends on fostering an environment where both community members and police officers better understand each other's perspectives. So while I absolutely support this recommendation, this training, I do recommend against naming the training Know Your Rights, as I believe it carries an adversarial implication that may not align with the collaboration and educational intent of such sessions. Instead, I suggest that we explore more inclusive and positive framing for the training to encourage participation and engagement from all parties involved in this training. Those are my responses to those 12 recommendations, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
For number 12, what would you call it? Like, what, know your rights, like, what else would you call it?
Well, that's why I said I suggest that we explore calling it something else, but I think in general, and I can speak from a police officer perspective, having done this job for 23 years, is when we talk about know your rights, I don't think I have any problem. Everybody should be educated on their rights and constitutional rights. But I think often, at least in my opinion, what I see is when there's a know your rights campaign, it is often seemed as adversarial, at least from a police perspective, because I've even seen cards that say, you know, when a police officer speaks to you, don't talk to them, don't provide any information, don't whatever it may be. And that's fine. Those are people's constitutional rights, depending on the circumstances. But I think that that often that is not the normal response that we have when we interact with the public. We have dialogue, we develop relationships, we go to understand each other. So I think when you just have a thing that says know your rights, and it's know your rights, so that, you know, I think, again, from a police perspective, it's often because, you know, so you don't get oppressed by the police. That inherently, to me, is an adversarial name and an adversarial conduct. So I guess depending on what the CPRB is looking for and the intent of this program, I guess I would probably need some clarification there. I would assume that when we talk about a Know Your Rights campaign, this would be an inclusive event where we're trying to build and foster positive interactions with the police department, not an adversarial action with the police department.
Okay, two things. Did you get the packet? Did you see the structure of like what the Know Your Rights Summit was gonna look like?
I did.
Okay, and then I would have to speak from not a board member's perspective, but a citizen's perspective. And so for me, being an African American male, most of the times when I get pulled over, you know, I don't think it's a dialogue too much. And so for me, when you were talking about know your rights, I did hear that you said was, you know, constitutional rights, right? Well, I think when you have an interaction with a police officer doesn't necessarily always view you as a person equal to them. In most cases, they're kind of playing the big boss approach, the big brother approach. So in that case, as a citizen, I would like to know my rights in that situation personally. Like if I'm able to pull out my ID at a certain spot or anything of that nature, to just keep it brief. So I don't personally, for me as an African American male that has interactions with this police department, I don't know what else to call it. Just for me, because I don't think knowing your rights is adversarial. I think it's exactly what it means. It's that I know how to act in the presence of a police officer when I'm pulled over. And during the structure of how the Know Your Rights Summit was actually prepared, I think it was very inclusive. I think it provided NAACP, ACLU to teach others about their rights in a forum base. And I think on the packet in itself, in the Know Your Rights section, it actually had sections about cultural competency. I think that can go both between the police department and citizens. And I also think on there, police simulator was on there, so people have an understanding what a police officer goes through too. So I don't think this would be adversarial at all. I think it would be more so of an informal, a learning situation. I do understand that, Colin Kaepernick does have a Know Your Rights Summit, and that is literally completely different from the structure of what was presented. So I don't think that is adversarial. I think when you're a citizen in the position that you're in, you do have rights and they could be violated. And that's why we even have an opening for police complaints too, because rights could be violated. So I think it's best to have a Know Your Rights Summit. I think we're kind of dumbing it down by trying to change the name and being softer.
Well, and just to respond to your comments, since I didn't opine on your content of your packet, my recommendation is simply reflected on the name. So, I wasn't giving an opinion on your packet or the outline or the structure of your proposed training. I'm talking specifically about the name. So I appreciate your input, though.
Somewhat similar to what Nico said, I think, regarding the monthly updates about complaints made. Number one, when we talked about monthly updates to the board on progress, conclusions, or impacts to the department on various major incidents, that sort of thing. What we were looking for was not anything, for example, the bike stop case where that person was shot was like, maybe even if it weren't monthly, investigation still ongoing. I mean, because periodically I'd wonder, so what was the basis for that bike stop? But we'll find out when everything's all done, or not, but at least we would know when it was finished. So it's not like we want to be looking, at least when we were drafting this and then the board approved it, that we want to be looking over the investigation as it progresses. But is it done? Is it still ongoing? And you explained to us that the officer has a right not to give a statement due because the criminal cases are still pending. And I definitely understand that. So we weren't looking for, I think, the specificity that we may have conveyed with that. And I actually understand your point more when you brought up tonight about, we specifically made recommendation about the cameras as well. So I think what Nico was saying, we just okay, there were no complaints this month, or next month there were 2, or there were 4, and we're investigating them, or they've been resolved to everybody's satisfaction. But it was more generalized stuff that we were not to be looking over your shoulder or impinging on, or we can't even be involved in the OIR investigation of those complaints.
Sure.
So,
And I appreciate that clarification. It may be a recommendation for the next ad hoc committee that does this, that maybe there's a time where after you have your draft recommendations where we sit down and maybe we talk about so that we can make sure that we're on the same page of what those recommendations mean, so I can give more appropriate responses.
That's a good idea.
I think we did do that, but
I don't recall that. I
Yeah.
don't think we did.
I remember. I was in Mexico. We went over the report with city staff and stuff like that. They gave us recommendations on verbiage changes and things like that. And so we had a meeting about that.
Sure.
I don't know if you were in that meeting, but I remember city staff was, so,
Got it. Okay.
yeah.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Questions? Several. Gonna have a line up here. I like it.
Hello. You guys had some great recommendations, honestly. That was really insightful. I wrote a couple of things down. I think it was number 4, talking about settlements, and settlements aren't a reflection of blah, blah, blah. You guys don't need to know. I'm going to have to respectfully disagree, because settlements go hand in hand with our tax dollars, right? So if money talks, so if we're shutting people up and we're doing things with the settlement, we do kind of need to know stuff. And I think that transparency is key there. And so if, let's say the police department is costing the city hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars, which we see in so many cities across the United States, and we don't need to know about it, well, that's our tax dollars. And what are you guys doing that maybe needs to have policy or police changes? So I don't think that that's separate. Everything is connected. Another thing is the polygraphs. This is fascinating that I don't know all the ways that you guys hire people, but polygraphs are not admissible in court. Psychopaths, pathological liars, and narcissists can pass them because they don't have empathy, or they are able to regulate their blood pressure because it's in their heart rate, and that's how it's kind of, seeing things. So maybe there could be something better. Polygraphs are also very expensive, and it is the reader, the person who is certified, but we all have biases. So how do we know their biases in reading something could actually is a problem. Next, culture orientation or mandatory training is a must. You talk about culture and inclusivity, but we can't do this all the time. It has to be. We have to have that integrated in the police and how they're interacting with us, because we all have biases going in. So if we're not mandating cultural type of orientation, what are we doing? And again, lastly, the whole Know Your Rights training. I worked in immigration. We have done Know Your Rights training. To say that it's an adversary for you, no, it is for us to know our rights. And so again, it's always a power dynamic. The police have the power. They have the guns. They have the law. They can put you in jail. So to say, oh, this is adversary to the cops, we have to know our rights. Cops have done a lot of horrendous things, even in this city. People have got to protect themselves. So remember, power dynamics is key, and people need to know their rights. So I think know your rights is a very good term to use.
Thank you.
You, whatever.
Thank you all for those recommendations and providing the space where we could hear our chief's responses to them. On that topic, I'd just like to provide some context to perhaps ease some of the logistical and administrative burdens done by the members of this committee. Notably, MPD's vision includes being a leader in intelligence-led policing, being a learning organization. And as we've seen tonight, clearly our chief is very open to receiving data germane to the points brought up by this committee's recommendations. Henceforth, I think it might be useful to provide some clarifying data, given that there is that openness. Regarding a militarized police force, something that I've talked about in this chamber before, some data that might be relevant to that for perhaps future recommendations that I would encourage this committee to make to MPD in future years and future annual reports. Research published in Nature's Journal of Human Behavior affirms the reality that a militarized use of local policing has not been found to reduce crime levels, not even a little bit. Moreover, polygraph tests While they are only one portion of MPD's hiring process, and it's not lost on me that that is only one portion of the process, I would say that at a time where we're exploring alternative options to augment or increase funding for chat, especially once our 5-year contract potentially comes up with the CCP, why is it that we're continuing to have our city council, which I recognize that y'all are not our city council and that the levels of authority and the purview are different here. But in terms of advocacy from this committee, I would like to see perhaps more advocacy towards our council who unanimously approved our last contract with our new polygrapher. Up to $500,000 over the next 5 years seems like a colossal waste of money to me at a time where our resources are already strapped too thin. And to our chief's own admission, he's not an expert or not a polygrapher. I'm not a polygrapher either, but I am a psychology teacher. And I feel that in that way, hey, I'll cite the American Psychological Association that has the consensus that polygraph tests are nothing more than pseudoscience. And to that end, I would hope that MPD could make good on their vision of being a learning organization and take recommendations that I hope this committee would make to MPD in the future about removing that unnecessary expense from their hiring process. Surely that money could be used towards better policing responses or addressing the root causes of some of the issues that are over-policed. We've talked about how immigration, we've talked about houselessness. I'd like to see funds relocated that way. Hey, perhaps that could be recommendations this committee would make either to MPD or to city council at large. Failing that, even if that money were to just go to chat and it were to stay within the sphere of policing, especially if we're unable to secure CCP funding in the future, I think that would be a much more moral, much more practical method of using our resources. So I really urge y'all in future recommendations to consider the removal of polygraph testing. I'm not sure how our chief can find it to be so valuable if he's not an expert and open to all that data, but I'm hoping providing it here can help you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I just want to go ahead and reiterate what my colleagues have been saying. I do really think that mandatory training for culturally responsive policing is something necessary, especially when the ACLU has found that our own Modesto Police Department target Black and brown folk at a disproportionate rate than other folks over the past decade. And I feel like if we don't make this a mandatory thing, it's just going to keep getting worse and worse. And we, again, someone here has said it before, we want to be the best police department in the nation, and yet we're already like being singled out by the ACLU. And I feel like if Modesto Police wants to be held to a high standard, I think that is one step of the way. And if there's police, one of the worries was like, hey, we're not going to have enough of the police force. I don't want bad police on my force, you know? I want those people to be educated, to be aware of like the struggles that these Black and brown folk have compared to their own experiences. And I really don't find it adversarial to know your rights. I think that's just, again, our constitutional rights. And the fact that, you know, being a little bit worried about, hey, don't talk to the cops, that's a citizen's right. You shouldn't be worried about that. If people don't want to talk to you and they just want to sign like off the ticket and then they could dispute that in court, that is their right. They don't have to talk to you. I understand most people, including me, used to talk to the cops, and most of the time, hey, they don't use it against you, but they can. And that is a fact because that's their job. They're trying to get information, but at the same time, they don't have to give you that information as well. So I really don't find anything bad with knowing your rights because that's simply what it is. It's knowing your rights. Most people don't know their rights. Knowing your rights is a really good call. And one more thing, I just wanted to add up with like the whole mandatory thing. We're just going ahead and repeat Akeem's name because I consider this kind of a hate crime. This man was Black, he was queer, and he was houseless. Lots of identities there. He was one of our most marginalized people in our group. How there was a quick close to his case is concerning, but at least we know that like maybe this person could still be alive right now if he had the adequate resources. And if we're wasting those resources on pseudoscience like polygraph test, this person could still be alive right now. That was our neighbor. And I feel like we still need to find that humanity in us to at least see that like these recommendations could actually save someone's life. And I know you guys as a board don't have a lot of power, but at least, just keep doing what you're doing. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We're gonna, yeah.
This is just very quick. I just want to comment on the issue about the title on Know Your Rights. I think a much better title would be Understanding Your Rights. I'm a retired teacher, and I know there's a difference between knowing something and understanding. And the understanding is so important. And it's not maybe as aggressive, but it's more important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. So, I believe that the purpose of this is to have that dialogue and to have communication between the police or amongst the police, this board, and the community. And I think this is definitely a time to really gather multiple perspectives, specifically for the police to get multiple perspectives. And hear responses from the community, especially the community members that can be most impacted by police. And one of the issues is, yeah, bias, and figuring out how to stamp out bias within the police. And I think it's important to really consider the idea of using polygraphs to find that, because as we've seen, they're not admissible to courts, they're not reliable, and maybe we can really look for other measures in order to do that. Trainings that maybe can support and provide that training too, because the bias does exist and it's been shown. Because the ACLU, a noteworthy organization who has had historical support for civil rights cases, has made that reports. And through that Modesto B article that had come about recently, it seems like the police allegedly dismissed it, that report, and called it divisive. And I don't think that's something that we should do, but I think that's something to take in critically and really think about. And I do support the idea of the know your rights being a thing. And I understand when it came to the idea of understanding them, but I feel like knowing them is also as vital because that power dynamic is there. Um, in the case, police can lie to us to get information. We can't, or we can face criminal issues, and it's important to know our rights because there is fear. There is fear of police when it comes to folks, and it's not something created, let's say, from some outside external factor, but because there are things that have happened. And if we do want a non-adversarial relationship, I think we should start with the know the rights and see where the community is coming from in that case. Because there have been instances, and we've noticed them. They've been in the news, even though most of those are definitely unreported. But we have situations here in this city that we've seen where there have been escalations that shouldn't have happened. So the idea of knowing your rights, we had folks that have been doing cop watches that legally can, but have also even been detained for that. And I think that idea of know your rights then shows that it's very vital, okay? Transparency is important. And so those settlements, it's not a business matter. It is definitely a matter that concerns the public since it comes out of our pockets. And usually it is out of concerning acts and concerning issues. And I think that transparency is always important. There is nothing to hide from that, especially not from the community that pays off those settlements. Thank you. Thank you also, the community, for making those recommendations.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, just I'll try to keep it quick to the 3 minutes. I know during the Forward Together committee, I think there was a lot of good faith effort for folks with different perspectives to try to see each other's perspectives. I know that there was some, conversations about specific situations, either involving me personally or community members that shared their stories with me that we did discuss where it was like, oh, okay, I see. Just to think of one example, going into a police department and asking for a complaint form and having the person at the desk say, okay, I'll be right back. And instead of coming right back, a sergeant came out and asked me, I'll just say it was me personally, why are you making a complaint? Do you want to talk about the situation? I shared that I felt that I was intimidated by that process. It was explained to me by, officers of why that sergeant might have done that and what their perspective might have been. That's just one example, and I just want to, I'm saying that as a basis for this, know your rights discussion, and coming from somebody that's done, maybe a dozen or more know your rights workshops, some, small groups of like 5 people to, maybe 30 people at different events and stuff like that. I understand, that you probably have seen like the types of groups that put on those events and why it might seem like it's maybe anti-police. I can tell you that when I got into doing Know Your Rights workshops and observing police conduct out in public, it was because of the stories that I had heard from family members and community members about, just another one example of me with somebody that I was with who said something, smart ass and maybe not nice, but just words to an officer, and then was grabbed and thrown down because of a smart ass comment. Things like that, from my perspective, that's adversarial, right? One of the first incidents that happened when a friend of mine, not me personally, this was back before even cell phones, like 2008, with one of those little camcorders recording his neighbor get arrested. This was the sheriff, not MPD, but the sheriff officer came and physically took his camera out of his hand from him, saying, "That's evidence. I have to take that." And this is all recorded and been posted on social media. This is years ago. Like I said, like 2008, 2009. That was adversarial, right? So from this perspective, the first time I went out downtown Modesto, because of friends and folks that we know saying, when we're out downtown Modesto on the weekend, we get approached, flashlights in our face, harassed. When we went out, I was detained for over an hour and then given a ticket for obstructing the sidewalk and loitering, even though they knew that the reason why we were standing there on the sidewalk is because we were observing police. And that was thrown out by the judge, who I think recognized that that was the wrong thing to do to somebody that was trying to observe police conduct. That was very adversarial in my perspective. I'm sorry, I'm out of time. A third incident, when it was like the second or third time we were observing police conduct, we witnessed a juvenile detained and then told he was going to be arrested because he was out after curfew, when we recorded the fact that he was held by police until it was after curfew. That was adversarial to that youth to do that to him. And this has all been recorded and documented. So I just wanted to point that out. It's another instance where different perspectives on why we wanted people to know their rights, because we saw people's rights violated. And the one more thing, if I can, very quickly, the tricky thing is almost like the need for 2 types of events, because I've done events where either the organization who asked me to speak or my organization said we didn't want police at this particular event because there was people there who experience these types of circumstances and worse, who, either traumatized or just don't feel comfortable being in a room with officers, especially if they're armed. And so we would respectfully ask for officers to not be at certain events and do know your rights training. So I can see why that might be observed. I'm trying to see from the other perspective, right? Like why that might be looked at as, oh, you don't want our perspective there, right? But there is a need to also have events where you're interacting, where you're talking with the community. So I understand that that's tricky, but I wanted to try, both. I hate saying like both sides, but people of different perspectives to see each other's perspectives. Just wanted to make those points. Thank you.
Thank you.
Where, right here?
There you go. You're good. Got it? You got it.
You got it.
All right, okay, thank you. I think that the topic, know your rights, is pretty broad, and it depends on the audience that you're talking to and who's presenting. An attorney would present a different set of information perhaps than a police sergeant would. So I see these kind of as two different things because, and maybe one way of clarifying is to put a title on there, Citizens Know Your Rights. Then that way it's aimed specifically at citizens knowing. And some of the different topics could be knowing your rights during traffic stops, or knowing your rights regarding search and seizures, or videotaping. So those would be some of the topics I think that citizens would be interested in. I think maybe a different training for police officers may be on helping them to understand more about the citizens' civil rights and, you know, what they should or could do, and some of the consequences if they violate civil rights. So I think that topic needs to be narrowed down ahead of time so that an attendee would know what kind of information they can expect to get from it.
Yeah, I had a thought in listening. I actually appreciated the suggestion to just change out to understanding. And what I got even from member Grant is there's events done like this that do have negative connotations, or they don't turn out the same. If you use the same title, how is anyone going to know if it's staged or set to go one way versus the other? So changing any one word in the title brings it to a new perspective for everyone. And I also support the idea of add citizen to engage them, but I get it. I think if there's ever similar type events that are anti-anything, then why assimilate the title, change it?
Gonna be discussing this at the
Yeah.
January meeting,
That's
right?
what I was gonna say. We're kind of just dragging on a simple suggestion on changing a name for 20 minutes now. So we are gonna talk about this in January, and I think we can just kind of stop where we are now in regards to the Know Your Rights Summit and pick this back up in the next meeting.
On board comments, policy goal number 8, view force policy to minimize likelihood of death resulting from use of force. Anybody, any report on that?
No, we don't have anything new
No
to
report.
report.
Okay, policy goal number 1, improve relations between the community and the department.
No, we don't have anything to report. We'll be meeting in January.
Okay. And policy goal 3, reduce youth arrests and particularly among Latino youth.
I did get confirmation back from Judge Villalobos that he is available in February 19th.
Great. Okay, we've already discussed the future agenda items, so we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good meeting.
Great meeting.